Sir, stand up now. That seat does not belong to you. The sharp command cut through the quiet first-class cabin with such force that every nearby conversation stopped instantly. A businessman lowered his tablet without saying a word. An elderly woman slowly removed her reading glasses. A young couple froze while placing their carry-on bags into the overhead compartment. Standing confidently in the aisle, the white lead flight attendant pointed toward the exit with professional certainty, convinced she was correcting a mistake before departure. Sitting calmly in seat 2 Alpha was Nathaniel Brooks, a 45-year-old black man wearing a charcoal sport coat over a light blue dress shirt, dark slacks, and polished brown leather shoes. A well-used leather travel bag rested beneath the seat in front of him, and his boarding pass remained neatly tucked inside his passport. Nothing about his appearance suggested extraordinary influence. He looked like an ordinary business traveler beginning another routine trip. Nathaniel slowly lifted his eyes and asked in a steady voice, "Has my reservation changed?" The lead flight attendant barely glanced toward the boarding pass before answering. "That seat has been reassigned. I need you to move immediately." Nathaniel remained perfectly still. "May I ask when it was changed?" She briefly looked toward the boarding door where an elegantly dressed white passenger waited with quiet confidence, as though the outcome had already been decided. "A priority passenger will be using this seat," she replied. Nathaniel looked back at her without changing his expression. "According to my boarding pass, I am the passenger assigned to seat 2 Alpha." The silence inside the cabin grew heavier. Several passengers exchanged uncertain looks, trying to understand whether they were witnessing a simple reservation problem or something much more uncomfortable. The waiting passenger adjusted the handle of his expensive suitcase but never questioned the situation. He simply stood there expecting the seat to become available. Nathaniel carefully unfolded his boarding pass and held it where it could easily be examined. "Would you please verify the reservation before asking me to leave?" His request was calm, respectful, and completely reasonable. The lead flight attendant did not take the document. "Sir, delaying boarding is affecting every passenger on this flight." Nathaniel nodded politely. Verifying information usually takes less time than correcting assumptions. His words were never louder than an ordinary conversation, yet several nearby passengers quietly looked toward the boarding pass in his hand. A younger flight attendant paused while greeting another traveler, noticing the unusual exchange unfolding only a few feet away. Near the cockpit entrance, the captain continued greeting passengers, unaware that a routine boarding process was quietly becoming something far more significant. Earlier that morning, Nathaniel had walked through the airport exactly like everyone else. He checked one carry-on bag, purchased coffee from a busy terminal cafe, waited patiently at the gate, and boarded with his assigned group. He had intentionally traveled alone without notifying anyone connected to the airline because he believed the most honest measure of customer service was the experience received when no one knew who you were. Around him, the first-class cabin remained frozen in uneasy silence. The lead flight attendant crossed her arms and took one deliberate step closer. "This is my final request, sir." Nathaniel met her eyes with remarkable composure. "Then my final question remains the same. Has my reservation changed?" For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Every passenger watching sensed that the next decision would shape far more than a single flight, even though none of them could have imagined that the following 45 minutes would place the entire airline under a level of executive scrutiny no one at Gate 14 had ever witnessed before. The lead flight attendant folded her arms and waited, convinced that the conversation had already reached its conclusion. Nathaniel Brooks remained seated without the slightest sign of frustration. He simply looked down at the boarding pass resting in his hand before raising his eyes again. "I would be happy to cooperate," he said politely, "if someone can first confirm that my reservation has actually changed." His calm response lingered in the quiet cabin. Several passengers who had originally assumed he was sitting in the wrong seat began watching more carefully. The elderly woman across the aisle slowly closed her novel and rested it on her lap. A businessman removed his wireless headphones, sensing that this was no longer an ordinary boarding delay. The white passenger waiting near the entrance shifted his expensive suitcase slightly closer, still expecting the first-class seat to become available. Before anyone else spoke, the younger flight attendant who had been assisting passengers nearby stepped forward with genuine professionalism. "May I see your boarding pass, sir?" Nathaniel handed it to her with a courteous smile. She scanned the barcode using her company device and waited while the reservation system refreshed. After a few seconds, she quietly read the result displayed on the screen. Seat 2 Alpha. Confirmed. She looked at the lead flight attendant with a puzzled expression. "The assignment appears to be correct." The lead flight attendant frowned slightly. "Refresh the system." The younger employee did exactly that. She manually entered the confirmation number instead of relying on the barcode. Once again, the reservation displayed exactly the same information. Passenger name. Flight number. Boarding group. Seat 2 Alpha. No upgrades. No seat changes. No operational restrictions. She looked back toward Nathaniel before speaking again. "Everything matches our records." Nathaniel nodded appreciatively. "Thank you for checking." The lead flight attendant glanced briefly at the screen but did not accept its conclusion. "There must be another issue." Nathaniel asked quietly, "Would you mind explaining what that issue is?" No answer came immediately. The silence spreading through the first-class cabin became noticeably heavier. Several passengers exchanged uncertain looks, realizing that every verified record now supported the man who had been asked to leave. Near the bulkhead, a retired airline captain who had remained quietly observant finally spoke in a calm, measured voice. "Reservation systems are designed to prevent exactly this kind of confusion. If the manifest confirms the assignment, company procedures normally follow the manifest." His words carried neither criticism nor emotion, only decades of professional experience. The younger flight attendant gave a slight nod because she understood he was correct. Earlier that morning, Nathaniel had blended effortlessly into the crowd moving through the airport. He stood patiently in the coffee line, thanked the cashier with a smile, waited at the gate without requesting any special assistance, and boarded with every other passenger in his assigned group. He had deliberately avoided notifying anyone connected with the airline because he believed customer service could only be measured honestly when employees treated every traveler exactly the same. Over the past year, his office had quietly received reports describing situations where verified reservations had somehow become less important than personal assumptions. Rather than reading another polished executive summary inside a conference room, Nathaniel wanted to witness the customer experience himself. That decision had brought him to seat 2 Alpha. The lead flight attendant took one slow breath before speaking again. "Sir, I still need you to step out of the aircraft while we continue reviewing this matter." The younger flight attendant looked down at the confirmed reservation in disbelief. The retired captain removed his glasses and sighed softly. The elderly woman quietly whispered, "But they already reviewed it." Nathaniel slowly stood, picked up his leather travel bag, and looked at the lead flight attendant with the same calm dignity he had shown from the beginning. "I will gladly step into the jet bridge," he said, "but I hope someone remembers that the reservation never changed. Only the decision did." The jet bridge felt strangely quiet as Nathaniel Brooks stepped aside exactly as requested, his leather travel bag resting beside his polished shoes while the aircraft door remained open behind him. Instead of arguing, he simply waited. The younger flight attendant followed a few moments later, still holding her company tablet with the reservation screen illuminated. "Sir," she said gently, "I checked the system twice. Your seat assignment has not changed." Nathaniel smiled politely. "Thank you for taking the time to verify it." Before either of them could continue, the station supervisor arrived carrying a handheld scanner connected directly to the airline reservation network. Unlike the growing tension surrounding the situation, his approach remained procedural. "Mr. Brooks, I would like to verify your reservation personally." Nathaniel handed him the boarding pass without hesitation. The supervisor scanned the barcode, waited while the system synchronized, then manually entered the confirmation number to eliminate any possibility of technical error. The result remained exactly the same. Passenger name confirmed. Flight number confirmed. Boarding group confirmed. Seat 2 Alpha confirmed. There were no equipment changes, no operational upgrades, no emergency maintenance notices, and no record showing the seat had ever been reassigned. The supervisor quietly looked at the younger flight attendant before nodding. The reservation is valid. She answered with visible relief. That is exactly what my device showed. Through the open aircraft door, several passengers continued watching from their seats. The elderly woman who had witnessed the exchange leaned slightly toward the aisle, hoping the misunderstanding would finally be resolved. The retired airline captain remained seated with his arms folded, observing every decision with the patience of someone who had spent decades trusting procedures instead of assumptions. The white passenger who had been waiting for the first-class seat shifted his attention between the supervisor and the lead flight attendant, no longer appearing as confident as he had only minutes earlier. The supervisor walked back into the cabin and spoke calmly with the lead flight attendant. Every verification confirms that seat 2 Alpha belongs to Mr. Brooks. She listened without interrupting, but her expression remained firm. I understand what the system says, she replied. I still believe we should continue with the reassignment. The supervisor looked genuinely surprised. There is no documented reason supporting a reassignment. Her answer came without hesitation. Then I am requesting additional review before allowing him to return. Those words settled heavily over the first-class cabin. Quiet conversation spread from one row to another as passengers struggled to understand why every verified record seemed unable to resolve a decision that should already have been finished. The retired airline captain finally stood and walked toward the aircraft entrance. May I say something? He asked respectfully. The supervisor nodded. In my career, reservation records settled questions like this every day, the captain said. Once the manifest confirms the passenger, continuing the dispute creates a larger problem than the original concern. His voice remained calm, carrying only the weight of long experience. Nathaniel heard every word from the jet bridge but offered no comment. He simply looked through the terminal windows where aircraft taxied beneath the afternoon sunlight, remembering advice his father had given him years earlier. Never allow another person's assumptions to decide your dignity. Around him, airport operations continued with perfect precision while only a few feet away a single unsupported decision had already delayed boarding, divided opinions, and transformed an ordinary afternoon flight into something none of the employees at Gate 14 yet understood would soon demand the attention of executives far beyond the airport. The station supervisor looked from the reservation screen to Nathaniel Brooks and quietly exhaled, recognizing that every documented fact supported the passenger standing patiently before him. Mr. Brooks, he said respectfully, your reservation is fully confirmed. I apologize for the delay. Nathaniel acknowledged the statement with a slight nod but did not move toward the aircraft. Thank you, he replied. I would simply appreciate having the same opportunity every passenger deserves, which is to be treated according to the verified information. Before the supervisor could answer, the lead flight attendant stepped into the jet bridge once again. Her posture remained composed, but her decision had not changed. I am requesting that boarding remain paused until additional authorization is received. The supervisor looked genuinely puzzled. Authorization for what? Every operational record confirms that Mr. Brooks is assigned to seat 2 Alpha. She answered without raising her voice. I believe further review is appropriate. The words echoed through the narrow jet bridge, leaving everyone present uncertain how a fully verified reservation had evolved into an unresolved dispute. Inside the aircraft, passengers continued waiting. The captain had now been informed that boarding remained incomplete, and the departure clock continued moving toward the scheduled pushback time. Flight attendants quietly answered questions from travelers who wanted to know why the aircraft had not departed. No one offered a detailed explanation because no one could explain why the documented reservation was still being questioned. The retired airline captain walked slowly into the jet bridge after receiving permission from the supervisor. I hope you will forgive an old pilot for speaking again, he said with a calm smile. Every minute an airplane sits unnecessarily at the gate affects dozens of people beyond this cabin. Decisions should always follow evidence because evidence allows operations to keep moving. His words carried no accusation, only wisdom earned through decades of responsibility. Nathaniel thanked him with a respectful nod. "I appreciate your perspective." Then he reached into the inside pocket of his sport coat and removed his mobile phone. There was no urgency in his movements. No dramatic expression crossed his face. He simply unlocked the device, opened a secure application, and reviewed a series of familiar options displayed on the screen. The station supervisor assumed Nathaniel was informing family members about the delay. The younger flight attendant believed he might be rescheduling a business meeting. Neither of them realized the application connected directly to a secure corporate governance portal used by strategic partners during operational audits. Nathaniel selected a category labeled Customer Service Incident Review, entered the flight number, confirmed the airport location, and attached a brief factual summary containing only verified information. Reservation confirmed. Boarding interrupted. Passenger removed despite documented assignment. No opinions. No emotional language. Only objective facts supported by available records. Before submitting the report, he paused for one brief moment as he remembered his father's voice from many years earlier. Character is measured most clearly when someone else forgets yours. Nathaniel pressed submit, locked the phone, and slipped it back into his pocket. Nothing around him appeared to change. The terminal remained busy with families rushing toward departure gates, baggage carts moving across the ramp, and aircraft taxiing beneath the afternoon sky. Yet somewhere far beyond Gate 14, encrypted notifications had already begun appearing inside executive offices that monitored contractual service standards. No alarm sounded in the terminal. No announcement interrupted the waiting passengers. Everything looked perfectly ordinary, even though the first step in a formal executive review had just been activated, and the next 45 minutes would quietly transform a routine boarding delay into the most closely examined customer service incident the airline had faced in years. Less than 3 minutes after Nathaniel Brooks submitted the incident report, the secure notification reached a compliance monitoring center hundreds of miles away. Inside a quiet executive operations office, an analyst reviewing routine service metrics noticed that the report carried an unusually high contractual priority level. Unlike ordinary customer complaints submitted after a trip, this report originated while the aircraft was still at the gate and contained verified operational data directly connected to an active flight. Company policy required immediate review. The analyst opened the file and carefully compared the submitted information with the airline reservation records that updated in real time. Every detail matched perfectly. Seat 2 Alpha remained assigned to Nathaniel Brooks. No upgrade had been processed. No equipment change had occurred. No emergency passenger relocation had been authorized. Within minutes, the analyst elevated the report to corporate compliance, where another review confirmed exactly the same findings. A short message appeared on multiple executive dashboards. Active customer service incident. Verified reservation dispute. Flight awaiting departure. Operational delay increasing. At the airport, nothing about the terminal suggested that events were beginning to move far beyond Gate 14. Families continued walking toward departures. Children watched airplanes through the large windows. Coffee shops served travelers preparing for afternoon flights. Only those standing near the aircraft knew that boarding had been paused far longer than anyone expected. The station supervisor checked his watch before quietly approaching Nathaniel once again. "Mr. Brooks, I appreciate your patience. We are still waiting for additional direction." Nathaniel answered with the same calm voice he had used from the beginning. "I understand. Thank you for keeping me informed." He never mentioned the report he had submitted. He never hinted that anyone beyond the airport was already reviewing the situation. He simply stood beside the window, watching baggage handlers finish loading luggage into the cargo compartment while the departure clock continued counting upward. Inside the aircraft, the captain received another update explaining that departure clearance would likely be missed if boarding did not resume soon. The retired airline captain seated in first class quietly shook his head. "Delays are expensive," he said to the elderly woman beside him. "But allowing verified procedures to be ignored can cost much more." She nodded thoughtfully. "It feels like everyone is waiting for permission to trust the facts they already have." Those words captured the entire situation. Every employee directly involved had already seen the reservation. Every electronic record confirmed exactly the same conclusion. Yet the aircraft remained parked because one unsupported decision continued outweighing every verified document. Meanwhile, inside the airline headquarters, corporate compliance requested participation from the legal department, customer experience division, and executive operations. What had first appeared to be a routine boarding disagreement was now classified as a potential governance issue involving adherence to documented service standards. Additional operational reports began arriving from the airport, confirming that the scheduled departure had now been significantly delayed. One executive quietly asked a simple question during the growing review meeting. "Has anyone identified the passenger involved?" Another employee opened the customer profile connected to Seat 2 Alpha. As the information loaded across the secure display, the atmosphere inside the conference room changed almost instantly. Several executives looked at one another without speaking because the name appearing on the screen was immediately recognizable throughout the organization. Back at Gate 14, Nathaniel remained completely unaware of those reactions, at least from the perspective of everyone around him. He stood with quiet patience, hands resting comfortably on the handle of his leather travel bag, while the first stage of a corporate review continued unfolding exactly as designed, guided not by emotion or influence, but by documented facts that no one could honestly dispute. Inside the executive conference room, the conversation stopped the moment the passenger profile finished loading across the secure display. One executive leaned forward to verify that the information on the screen was accurate before speaking. "Please confirm that this is the same passenger connected to the active incident." A compliance manager compared the reservation records with the customer profile and nodded. "Confirmed." Nathaniel Brooks, founder and chief executive officer of Brooks Strategic Systems. No one reacted because of his title alone. They reacted because Brooks Strategic Systems had spent years serving as one of the airline's most trusted strategic technology partners, helping develop the very customer service monitoring systems now documenting the incident in real time. Another executive quietly asked, "Did he identify himself at the airport?" The answer came immediately. No. According to every report, he presented only his boarding pass and repeatedly asked employees to verify the reservation. The room fell silent again. The vice president of customer experience reviewed the timeline displayed across the large monitor. Reservation verified multiple times. Seat assignment confirmed by system. Passenger removed from boarding area despite documented records. Departure delayed while additional review continued without operational justification. "Everything points to the same conclusion," she said. The documented facts were available before the delay ever happened. The chief compliance officer folded his hands together. "Then this is no longer a reservation issue. This is a decision-making issue." At Gate 14, none of the employees knew that executives were now studying every minute of the timeline. The station supervisor continued receiving short messages through his company tablet requesting factual updates rather than explanations. "Confirm current passenger location." "Confirm aircraft status." "Confirm whether the reservation remains unchanged." Each answer was identical. "Passenger waiting in jet bridge." "Aircraft at gate." "Reservation unchanged." Nathaniel stood quietly beside the terminal windows, watching another aircraft lift smoothly into the afternoon sky. The younger flight attendant approached him with an apologetic expression. "Mr. Brooks, I know this has taken much longer than anyone expected." Nathaniel offered a reassuring smile. "Thank you. I know you followed the information that was available to you." She hesitated before asking, "May I ask why you have remained so calm through all of this?" Nathaniel looked toward the aircraft before answering. "Because the truth does not become stronger when someone raises their voice." It simply needs the opportunity to be seen. She reflected on those words in thoughtful silence. Inside the first-class cabin, the retired airline captain quietly observed the gate through the open aircraft door. "Whatever is happening now," he said softly to the elderly woman beside him, "it is happening far above this airplane." She nodded. "You can almost feel it." At headquarters, executive operations requested a live conference with senior airport leadership. Human Resources joined the meeting to observe procedural compliance while the legal department began preserving operational records, security timestamps, reservation logs, and communication history connected to the incident. No disciplinary decisions were discussed. The focus remained entirely on understanding why verified documentation had been disregarded. One executive summarized the situation with remarkable clarity. "Mr. Brooks never requested special treatment. He requested standard treatment." Those words settled over the conference room as everyone reviewed the growing file once more. 45 minutes earlier, the incident had appeared to involve a single first-class seat. Now it had become an examination of whether the airline's own values were being followed when no one believed an ordinary passenger might actually matter. Only a handful of people knew the name behind the investigation, but every executive understood the lesson already taking shape. Procedures exist to protect every traveler equally, especially on the days when assumptions become louder than facts. Nearly 45 minutes had passed since Nathaniel Brooks had first been asked to leave his assigned seat, yet he remained exactly as he had from the beginning, composed, patient, and quietly respectful toward every employee who approached him. The difference now was no longer at the gate. The difference existed hundreds of miles away, where the executive review had reached its final stage. The chief executive officer of the airline joined the secure conference call after reviewing the complete timeline for himself. He studied the reservation history, the boarding records, the gate activity log, and the statements collected from the station supervisor, the younger flight attendant, and the retired airline captain who had voluntarily agreed to provide an independent account. Every document led to the same conclusion. Nathaniel Brooks had presented a valid boarding pass. His reservation had been verified repeatedly. No operational reason had ever existed to remove him from Seat 2 Alpha. The airline chief executive officer looked around the conference room before asking one final question. "Did Mr. Brooks ever identify himself as the chief executive officer of Brooks Strategic Systems?" The answer came immediately. "No. He never mentioned his position. He never requested special consideration. He only asked employees to verify the documented reservation." A long silence settled over the room because everyone understood the significance of that answer. Nathaniel had never relied upon status. He had relied upon process. The airline chief executive officer slowly nodded. Then the integrity of our procedures was being tested, not our ability to recognize an important executive. At Gate 14, the station supervisor received a priority communication requesting that he immediately escort Nathaniel to a private customer service office. He approached with visible professionalism. "Mr. Brooks, headquarters has asked that I personally accompany you for a brief conversation." Nathaniel smiled politely. "Certainly." As they walked together through the terminal, employees passing in the corridor noticed senior airport managers moving with unusual urgency toward the same office. Inside, a secure video conference had already been established. When the large display activated, several senior executives appeared on the screen. The airline chief executive officer spoke first. "Mr. Brooks, thank you for your patience today. Before we discuss anything else, I would like to apologize for the experience you have had while traveling with us." Nathaniel acknowledged the apology with a quiet nod. "I appreciate you taking the time to review the facts." The chief executive officer continued. "When your name appeared in our review, many people immediately recognized who you are. However, after reading the complete timeline, I realized that your identity should never have mattered. Every traveler deserves the same respect that our policies promise." Nathaniel answered with complete sincerity. "That is exactly why I never introduced myself. If respect depends upon recognition, then the process is already broken." Those words remained in the room long after he finished speaking. Several executives lowered their eyes toward the investigation file because they understood the truth behind the statement. The review had revealed far more than a disagreement over one seat. It had exposed the moment when verified evidence had been replaced by personal judgment. The airline chief executive officer assured Nathaniel that human resources, corporate compliance, and executive operations would complete a full review according to company policy before any employment decisions were made. Nathaniel simply replied, "That is all I ever hoped would happen. Let the documented facts speak for themselves." As the conference ended, everyone present understood that the most powerful person involved in the entire incident had never attempted to exercise power. He had demonstrated something much more difficult: complete confidence that truth, when protected by honest procedures, could ultimately speak louder than authority itself. After the secure conference concluded, the airport leadership immediately shifted from reviewing the incident to restoring normal operations while preserving every documented record for the formal investigation. Nathaniel Brooks was escorted back toward Gate 14 by the station supervisor, who no longer appeared burdened by uncertainty. Instead, his expression reflected the quiet confidence of someone who now understood exactly what the company expected from every employee. As they approached the aircraft, the lead flight attendant stood near the boarding door beside an airport operations manager and a representative from Human Resources who had arrived from the regional office. No one spoke until the operations manager addressed Nathaniel directly. "Mr. Brooks, on behalf of our airport leadership, I want to apologize once again for the experience you had today. Your reservation has been confirmed from the beginning, and you are welcome to return to Seat 2 Alpha whenever you are ready." Nathaniel responded with the same calm dignity that had defined every moment of the afternoon. "Thank you. I appreciate the professionalism shown by everyone who took the time to review the documented facts." He never looked toward the lead flight attendant with anger or satisfaction. Instead, he simply acknowledged everyone present with a respectful nod before stepping back onto the aircraft. Inside the first-class cabin, conversations immediately stopped. The elderly woman smiled warmly as Nathaniel walked past her seat. "I am glad you came back," she said quietly. Nathaniel answered with a grateful smile. "Thank you." The retired airline captain stood for a moment as Nathaniel reached Seat 2 Alpha. "You handled yourself with remarkable grace," he said. "Many people would not have remained so patient." Nathaniel carefully placed his leather travel bag beneath the seat and replied, "Patience gives the truth enough time to arrive." The captain nodded thoughtfully before returning to his own seat. While passengers settled once again, the Human Resources representative met privately with the lead flight attendant and informed her that, consistent with company policy, she was being relieved of active flight duties pending the outcome of a formal investigation. The conversation remained respectful and professional. There were no raised voices, no public embarrassment, and no immediate conclusions beyond the procedural decision that she would not continue working the flight while the review remained open. She quietly acknowledged the instruction, surrendered the required company credentials for temporary administrative processing, and departed the aircraft accompanied by airport management. The younger flight attendant watched silently, understanding that the organization was following established procedures rather than acting on emotion. Moments later, another qualified crew member arrived to complete the operating team, allowing the captain to prepare for departure. At headquarters, corporate compliance finalized instructions for human resources, legal, and customer experience to conduct a comprehensive review of every available record, including reservation logs, operational communications, witness statements, and training compliance history. The purpose was not simply to determine what had happened, but to understand why verified information had failed to guide an important customer service decision. As the aircraft door finally closed, the atmosphere inside the cabin felt completely different from the one that had existed less than an hour earlier. The silence was no longer uncomfortable. It carried a shared understanding that respect had finally caught up with the facts. Nathaniel fastened his seatbelt, looked once through the window at the busy airport beyond the gate, and quietly reflected that genuine accountability never begins with punishment. It begins the moment an organization chooses to let truth become more important than assumption. The aircraft finally pushed back from the gate almost 45 minutes behind schedule, but inside the first-class cabin the atmosphere had changed in a way that no departure announcement could explain. The engines gradually increased power as the airplane taxied toward the runway, and the passengers who had witnessed every moment of the delay sat quietly, each reflecting on what had unfolded before their eyes. Nathaniel Brooks remained in seat 2 Alpha exactly where his boarding pass had placed him from the very beginning. He looked out the window as the terminal slowly disappeared behind the wing, showing no sign of triumph, resentment, or satisfaction. For him, the journey had never been about winning an argument. It had always been about allowing the documented truth to receive the same respect that every passenger deserved. 2 days later, the airline completed its formal review. Human resources, corporate compliance, legal, executive operations, and customer experience jointly examined reservation records, operational logs, witness statements, security timestamps, and employee interviews. Every source of evidence supported the same conclusion reached on the day of the incident. Nathaniel Brooks had been the rightful occupant of seat 2 Alpha from the moment he checked in until the aircraft departed. The investigation also concluded that established customer service procedures had not been followed after multiple electronic verifications confirmed his reservation. In accordance with company policy and after completing the required review process, the lead flight attendant's employment with the airline was terminated. The official decision stated that the outcome resulted from the organization's internal standards, documented findings, and failure to follow verified operational procedures. Nathaniel neither requested nor influenced that decision. When the airline chief executive officer informed him that the investigation had concluded, Nathaniel answered with the same calm sincerity he had demonstrated throughout the entire experience. "I never wanted someone to lose a career," he said. "I wanted every traveler to know that the rules protecting fairness apply to everyone, especially when assumptions are strongest." Those words remained with the executive team long after the conversation ended. During the following weeks, the airline introduced additional customer service training emphasizing evidence-based decision-making, procedural accountability, respectful communication, and the importance of verifying facts before reaching conclusions. Real examples from the investigation were incorporated into management workshops without identifying individual employees, allowing the incident to become an opportunity for organizational learning rather than public humiliation. The retired airline captain later wrote a letter to the company praising the professionalism shown once leadership became aware of the facts. The elderly woman who had quietly observed the entire experience sent a message thanking the airline for choosing accountability instead of denial. The younger flight attendant continued her career with renewed confidence, carrying forward the lesson that professionalism begins by trusting verified information before personal impressions. As for Nathaniel Brooks, he returned to his ordinary routine of traveling alone, carrying the same leather travel bag, waiting in the same security lines, and boarding aircraft without announcing who he was. He understood that genuine character is revealed most clearly when no one is watching for greatness. Long before anyone recognized his title, his actions had already revealed his integrity. And perhaps that became the most unforgettable lesson of all. Respect should never be reserved for the powerful after their identity becomes known. It should be offered freely to every person from the very first moment, because dignity is not earned by position, wealth, or influence. It belongs equally to every human being, and the strongest organizations are the ones that remember that truth before a single assumption is ever allowed to take someone else's seat.